Welcome to the Hunt Fish Travel Podcast, the first and longest running female hosted hunting podcast. She's fine-tuned her bow and sighted in her rifle. She has deer on the brain and is ready to go. But first, she's helping you navigate your trip of a lifetime. And now, here's your hostess, Carrie Zilka.
This is the Hunt Fish Travel Podcast. I am your hostess, Carrie Z. Today, we have a really exciting guest, and I will tell you exactly where this all came from down the rabbit hole that I went when I was on the DNR website. But we have Erin Larson, the Wisconsin DNR Deer Herd Health Specialist. And we are going to talk about CWD and testing sites because I was reading through them and I was a little confused. And I said, well, if I have these questions, other people are going to have these questions. Just before we get into the episode, I'd like to remind you that one of our title sponsors is Spy Point, and they are running a really, really, really great giveaway right now. I mean, you're crazy not to enter. You can win a $500 Spy Point bundle. All you have to do is follow them on Instagram or Facebook, post a hunting photo, and it can be anything. It can literally be you sleeping in the blind, and just caption it with hashtag #WhyISpyPoint, and then just tag Spy Point in it. They're going to give away 5 of these bundles in the month of November, so you're crazy not to take part. Anyhow, Erin, welcome to the show. Appreciate you taking the time. Yeah, this is
Thank
you
for having me, Carrie.
Like I said, we're gearing up for the 9-day Wisconsin gun season here in a couple of days. And
right.
So I guess before we even get to that point and the questions that I have, why don't you explain to the listeners exactly what CWD is in case they don't know? I mean, in case they've been living under a rock.
Sure. Yeah, no, and it's good to always review the basics. So chronic wasting disease, or CWD as we usually hear it called, is a disease that's caused by a prion. So all mammals have prions in their body, but the CWD prion is when the prion becomes misfolded. So the protein becomes misfolded, then it comes into contact with other prion proteins, causes those to become misfolded, and then eventually expands throughout the body so that this deer will show signs of being very sick. So CWD is a always fatal disease, but the hard thing about CWD is it is a very slow progressing disease. So these deer, in Wisconsin, it's just our white-tailed deer, but there are other cervids or in the deer family that can be impacted. So moose, elk, caribou, reindeer are the other species. So in Wisconsin, it's just our deer. And the deer can have the disease for over a year and a half. They look perfectly healthy until they start to look sick. So when they start to look sick, you're going to see signs like, extremely thin, emaciated, lowering the head, potentially drooling, or their ears kind of lowered too. Once they start to show those signs, that's the end stage of the disease, and they're going to, not last much more than a couple of additional months. So, but the hard thing is that these deer, when they don't look sick, could still be spreading the disease to other deer.
And that's the reason why baiting is either frowned upon or illegal in a lot of places, because it's transmitted through the moisture in their noses, right? When they touch their noses.
Sure. So CWD can be transmitted by direct transmission. So just like you said, so that deer-to-deer contact. It can also be transmitted indirectly. So that would be if the deer is walking around before it shows signs, like we said, it could be shedding those prions into the environment. Another deer could come into contact with that soil particle that binded to those prions and in a sense get CWD from that way as well. So baiting and feeding, we certainly know that deer congregate together and they have interactions together just naturally, but baiting and feeding is one way that can cause more unnatural congregation. So it can bring more deer together in a smaller location. And just like you said, it can be transmitted from their nasal passages, from saliva, all those bodily fluids that they could come into contact with at a baiting
So how
site.
do you because I'm nosy, how do you handle the people who are like, oh, the DNR is just being a jerk. They don't want us to bait because they don't want us to kill more deer or whatever. I swear I see those dumb comments in forums and groups and I'm just like, I can't even. How do you handle people who come at you like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly people that have historically hunted with bait, and that's what they would like to continue to do. So it can be a shock when a CWD positive is found in their county or within 10 miles. We also, a baiting and feeding ban will go into place in their county if a positive detection is within 10 miles of theirs. And that could be wild or captive. So we also have a lot of captive facilities, deer farms in Wisconsin. That's not regulated by the DNR. That's the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection, or DACAP. But, regardless, we are required to put a baiting and feeding ban in place from a wild or captive CWD positive. And so, a hunter who may be up north, who's used bait for a while, and then, we have this positive and put that ban in place, there are certainly people that are going to be upset and feel like they're not able to be successful in their hunt. But there are certainly other measures folks can do to be successful, regardless of where in the state they are. Doing a lot of prep work before the season starts is a big one, making sure you're going out to your hunting area, looking for sign, looking at what trails those deer are using, because they don't stay the same every year, as we all know. And so doing the prep work ahead of time and making sure that you do what you can to be successful. But, and I always like to say too, hunting for me and hopefully for most of our folks in Wisconsin can be just as enjoyable if it's not successul. So just getting out into the woods is a big thing
throughout the year.
And we want to teach that to our younger generations
I always see the picture of the new hunter, he's 12 and he just caught this or shot this 12 or 14. I'm he's ruined forever. He's going to expect that every year, literally.
Now he's going to think that that's how every time that has to happen.
So say I'm sitting out say it's opening morning, right? And the deer got up and they're moving because there's lots of people in the woods and stirring them up. What should I look for? And for anyone who hasn't hunted a gun season, especially here in Wisconsin where we have a ton of hunters out in the woods, there's that sense of urgency. As soon as you see a deer, I got to get it before the next guy or whatever. So there's a very short time period, in my opinion, sometimes when you see a deer, or even just a shot opportunity might just be a split second. So you line up the shot, you verify that it's a shootable deer, and that it's a safe and ethical shot. But then as you're doing that, you notice some signs. What are some of the signs you might want to keep an eye out for to say, this deer might be sick?
Sure. Yeah. So the majority of the deer that test positive in Wisconsin look perfectly healthy. So it's not as common as people may think. And we hear that too, CWD isn't killing deer because we never see any sick deer. Well, that's because these deer are, getting harvested before they are able to show those signs often. So the majority of our deer do look perfectly healthy that test positive, but we certainly do get those deer that are starting to show those signs. So, if the hunter notices, another sign that they may notice is the deer's not very aware of humans or how they should be. And certainly, the bucks get kind of crazy during rut and sometimes don't care too much about humans at that point either because they're just thinking about one thing. But that is one sign is you see these deer that just don't seem aware of what's going on at all. So, in outside of hunting season, like you said, there's a lot of people taking to the woods on Saturday and Sunday. So we have a lot of eyes on what's going on out there. But even throughout the rest of the year, if you as a landowner or just somebody out in the woods sees a deer that it does not look healthy, it's showing those classic CWD signs. We get those reports and we value those reports. So we ask folks to, we have a webpage just for that. So if you went to dnr.wi.gov, then put in sick deer or dead deer in the search, it'll pop you right to this page that gives you those common CWD signs and then gives you an email or a phone call or a phone number to call. And what happens is if that deer is one that we determine is yes, could be chronic wasting disease, we'll give the landowner permission to put that deer down if it's a safe location to do so. They don't have to, if we've given permission, they don't have to tag that deer with a harvest authorization. We will come pick it up and sample it for chronic wasting disease. So we are able to give folks permission to put a deer down without, harvesting it with a
Gotcha.
a harvest authorization
Okay.
or a tag.
So I've established that it's what I think is a healthy deer, and I take the shot and I drop it. What are my next steps? So some of the documentation that I read, so testing takes like 14 days. So while I'm in the field and I've just field dressed my deer, what are the next steps I should take if I want to get it tested?
Yeah, no, great question. So is no field test. So that's one thing that sometimes folks hear about, or are wondering if there is. So like with COVID, where we were able to get a home test within a number of months after the outbreak, there is no equivalent for CWD. There's not a test that a hunter can do, not a USDA certified test that a hunter can do. So all state agencies use just USDA certified tests to test the deer for chronic wasting disease. And there's just two of those. So what we recommend for hunters is, you harvest your deer, you likely field dress it, and then you're heading home after you're done hunting for the day. So there's a couple of different options for you. We do have self-service kiosks throughout every single county in the state. So if you want to do it right on your way home, that's an option. And you can we have a map on our website, an interactive map where you can find those locations. So kiosks are one where it's going to be available 24 hours a day. It has all the materials that you need, and they're basically set up so that you as a hunter would remove the head from your deer. There's a saw there, put it in a bag, fill out a little bit of data, and then there's usually a freezer or some kind of container for that deer head. So that's one option. We do have also.
This is literally what sent me down the rabbit hole with this whole topic. So, and I will link to the map where you can find these kiosks in the show notes. So okay. So what if I've just shot like a 20-point buck, right? And I don't want to put the head in the bag and send it off because I know I'll never get it back because somebody's going to steal it. I just know it. What then? What then?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we certainly want people to still be able to test their deer, but not, if they want to get a mount done, whether it's a full head mount or a Euro mount or a shoulder mount, we have ways to get that done. So if it is a shoulder mount or a head mount, that's where the taxidermist is going to need the hide, from that deer. And so then what we recommend is to bring your deer to your taxidermist and tell the taxidermist, hey, I want to get this sampled for CWD. Can you remove the cape for me and give me back basically the inside of the head? So what we collect for the samples are lymph nodes inside of the head, way kind of near the base of the throat. And so the taxidermist could remove the cape for you, basically just skinning off the part that they'll use to make their mount, give you back the inside of the head, and then you can bring that to one of our kiosks. Or we also have staffed locations like meat processors or a gas station. Those are available on the map too. So you could bring that back, and then you have what you need for your mount. But then you can still get your deer sampled. There's also another popular mount is a European mount where it's just the skull and the antlers. So in that case, you want the whole skull, right? And so what we offer with those, one of the options is to contact your local biologist in that county. So we have on our website too, we have a number you can call to say, I'd like a European mount. Can I make an appointment? Basically is what you're doing. And then you'd make an appointment with our biologist in that county, somebody who's very close to you, so that you're not having to travel. What they would do is they would actually remove the lymph nodes while you're waiting. And so because with a Euro mount, you don't need to worry about cutting through the cape. You're not keeping that, but you want the skull. So they would remove the lymph nodes right then and there, and then give you back the whole head so that you can then take that to your taxidermist to get your Euro mount done.
Freezing the head, does that destroy or compromise the integrity of the testing? Like what if I'm up north and I'm at an outfitter, say, or whatever, and they freeze the carcass for me because I'm going to take it home. I'm going to butcher it myself, but I still have 5 days left to the hunt. And I can't get to the biologist for, say, 10 days. Does that break down the integrity of what would be tested? Okay.
It does not. No, not at all. So, we want to avoid having multiple freeze thaws. So if you had 5 in a row, that's not ideal. But if you're just freezing it, there's no issues with that because that's what we do as well.
Perfect. I just wasn't sure if, I don't know, like I'm obviously not a biologist or a scientist, so I just want to make sure that if I ever shoot a trophy buck in a CWD county, I know what to do. So,
Right, right. Yeah, we certainly do want to help folks be
yeah.
able to get those mounts done. So I know we're having one
Are
done for
you?
my son's first
That's
buck
fun.
this year, so it's definitely important.
The kiosks, I did see that so say I'm in an area where it is a CWD county and there is not a kiosk close to me, but I am like, oh, I have this business in this parking lot. Perhaps I'd like to host a kiosk or CWD testing center. Can I do that?
Yeah, so we have throughout the state, we have contacts for like each part of the state, so each district or region. So in the north, we have a contact, west central, northeast, and the south. So those are the boots on the ground managers of that particular area. And so a business would reach out to them or their local biologist if they know who that is. That those information and those names can be found on our website. And then they would say, I'm interested in having the location here, and they can work together to get that put out on the landscape. So
and does
absolutely.
the test results, it said on the website that it takes about 10 to 14 days. Do you get the results via email or is it only mail?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I would like to just circle back a little bit because just to help
Yeah.
folks understand why it takes that long. So, we'd started talking about how you harvested your deer and then what to do. And you could drop it off at a sampling location on your way home or visit one after if you wanted to process your deer first. But what happens is you drop your sample off at one of our sampling locations on the map. Those get picked up every couple of days by our staff. And then every deer that gets sampled, every wild deer gets processed at our processing center, which is in Poinette. So what happens there is we prep the samples for the test, we check in all the data and get everything ready to go, and then we work with an external lab. So we don't do the run the test ourselves. So that we work with the Wisconsin Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory, which we are lucky to have one in Wisconsin because there are only a handful of certified laboratories in the country that can do the CWD test. So we have one right in Madison, WVDL. And so after we have the samples prepared at our processing center, we bring them to that laboratory. They run the test, which is a multi-machine test too. So it's not a quick test either. It takes many hours. And as you can imagine with volume, it takes a while to get through the number of samples that we send them. So that's why there's those multiple steps where it gets dropped off, it has to be picked up, brought to our processing center, and then the lab does the test for us. And then when they have the result, they send it back to us in electronic form, and we immediately then will email that out to all the hunters that have an email address on their Go Wild account. It's available on our website as well, so you can look it up with your 6-digit identifier or CWD barcode, as we call it. If you don't have an email address, you will get a letter for a positive, but not for a not detected. So you would need to look up, you'd have to look it up in there, or the other place to look it up besides our website is in your Go Wild account. So where you purchase your license, where all your tags or harvest authorizations are listed, you can also see your CWD result there too.
Yeah.
So definitely ideal to have your email.
And I didn't realize that it would
be.
I guess that makes sense. Duh. When you're harvesting an animal and you fill out the harvest report card and you have your, like you said, your Go Wild account number there, and that does make sense. Actually, I guess I don't know what I was thinking. That's why I'm doing this episode, because I'm so confused. I have questions. So that's fascinating. How many samples do you think you guys test in a year? Like, do you know off the top of your head, like last year, how many you guys tested?
I do. So last year we tested, I believe it was 17,200.
Wow.
So this year our projected number is slightly more, around 19,500. So the last few years we've been around, give or take 20, close, a little above or below.
And I do
20,
want to point out that I feel like what we pay for a resident gun season deer tag is really low, especially when it comes to, I'm sure, the cost that hiring this agency and putting out the kiosks and everything. This is not cheap stuff. This is a lot of money. And I think it's interesting, just as a side note caveat, that our licenses haven't like increased despite of the additional costs that the DNR is funding into projects and testing and stuff. I just think that's kind of interesting. So anybody who says it's really expensive or is like, oh, we have to raise our license $2, well, this is probably why a lot of those costs are going, so that we don't get sick. Just, I'm going to get off my soapbox now.
Yeah, and there's no evidence humans are able to get chronic wasting disease at this point. It does seem that there is a strong species barrier, but there is still research looking into it. We certainly don't know everything about prion diseases like we do. We know
Sure.
a lot more about viruses, and CWD is such a different type of disease that we still don't know everything about it. And so the recommendations from those agencies that specialize in human health, like CDC or World Health Organization, they recommend getting your deer tested before consuming it and to not consume positive animals, because the risk is not zero. Again, we don't, at this point, there's no evidence humans are able to get it, but there's some research out there still looking into it that is.
So is it a concern
ongoing.
that, so what if I shoot a deer and then I take it to my general processor and he's not that careful with keeping it separate? Well, I mean, I know most of them are, and I understand that. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. And say that meat comes in contact with another, I don't know, chops or whatever, another bit of meat. Can that be passed from that processed meat to another processed steak or roast or whatever?
So, just coming in contact would be hard to say, but, and so meat processors themselves are regulated by DATCAP as well, so that their regulations all come from that agency, not from us. You can certainly ask for your deer to be processed separately, because I do know there are certainly ones that likely still batch deer. And so that's more likely where yours could be batched with somebody's who didn't have it tested and was positive or wasn't concerned. But you can ask your meat processor to have it kept separate, or certainly process it yourself.
And what a bummer it would be if you pay $100 or $200 to have it processed and then it came back positive. yeah, right.
More than that.
I mean,
right.
What a
right,
bummer
absolutely. Yeah, and even if you do it yourself, it's
for real.
It's all the time, and we've had positives in my family too. So I get how that feels after you put in that energy, and also to take the life of that animal and feel like if you choose not to consume
it. What can you do with the meat? Can you make dog food?
But
I don't know. Feed it. I guess don't feed it to the pigs. I feel like that's how COVID started. So let's not do that.
Yeah, we recommend it. Well, it's a personal decision on if you want to consume it or not. If you decide you don't want it and it's tested positive, we recommend disposing of it in a dumpster. So that's another thing that's available on our or in a landfill where those dumpsters are going to end up. So that's another thing that's on that map that we've talked about, is all of the disposal options. So we just really want to try to keep any prions off of the landscape, since we know that there is that direct transmission that can occur as well. And so if it goes into a dumpster and ends up at a landfill, it's contained. It's not going to be in an area where it can leach out.
Very cool. Are there any questions that you've been asked that I didn't cover or bring up? Because those were really the biggest questions that I had. I'm like, what do I do? I don't even know.
Yeah, no, I think it's, just how the process works, I think is important for folks to understand, because, I certainly get that that test, having it come back 10 to 14 days after you've harvested or dropped off that deer for sampling is a long time. And, even if you process it yourself, you're likely doing it at that point. But with just all the different steps, it unfortunately does take time to get through. And every year we do try to look at any improvements we can make to try to improve our turnaround time, or the time to which we can then get that result back to hunters. But I just want to encourage hunters to keep getting out there, keep hunting, enjoy our, great tradition in Wisconsin. We have a lot of resources available to help with CWD surveillance, but, we still want folks to get out there and enjoy the fall. It always makes me sad
when I hear that it's a big deterrent to people who, grew up hunting and go hunting, and then all of a sudden now they don't, because and I understand it's a personal choice and you want to be safe and everything, but it just always bums me out from a hunter retention standpoint.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah, we certainly know that hunter retention is an issue,
Right.
not just in Wisconsin, but pretty much probably
Yeah.
the whole United States. So, trying to get our kids interested, or other folks that haven't tried hunting before,
Yeah.
is important. And deer overall, deer herd health, hunting is and hunters are one of our main partners in that. We have high numbers of deer in Wisconsin, and so by having that harvest is helped to keep our population at a more healthy
Well,
level.
we have just a few more minutes before I'm out of time here. Why don't you tell the listeners, and I'm curious too, how did you get into the field that you're in and become a biologist for the Wisconsin DNR? Are you a native of Wisconsin? Where are you from?
I'm not. So I grew up in northeast Minnesota, so very close to the Canadian border on the
Nice.
shore of Lake Superior, in Grand Marais, Minnesota. So, but my dad was a forester, so he worked for the U.S. Forest Service. And growing up in that part of Minnesota, it's very, very rural. And so, of course, we were outside a lot, and had that sort of lifestyle. And so I always knew I wanted to do something with natural resources, especially, girls want to be
Yeah.
like their dads, or, look up to their dads. And so I set my sights on Stevens Point, in Wisconsin here, because that's one of the great known schools for natural resources. But my dad was in forestry. I always felt more of a interest in wildlife. So I went to Point to get my wildlife degree, and realized, that it was the field for me. I really enjoyed, my time in getting my degrees. So after college, was able to get a job in the natural resources field, and shortly after, a few positions with the DNR. And so I've been with the DNR for, probably 17, 18 years at this point. So quite a while. And I've had a few different positions, but the majority of them, probably 15 years out of the 17, have been in some aspect of wildlife health. And so really found an interest in there, and found, wanting to make a difference for, the folks of Wisconsin, and to help protect our natural resources, so that we can all
That's
enjoy
super
them
cool.
for the future
I
too.
love that. And I love that you went to Point, because we have family members who are teenagers at the moment looking at, I'm trying so hard to convince them, like, that's really where you want to go. No, I want to go to this. No, I'm telling you, if that's what you want to get into. So, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a great school too. Nice sized town, and very good school. So
Awesome.
I enjoyed my time
Well,
there.
Erin, I can't thank you enough for wanting to come on the show and explaining the stuff to me. Like I said, I feel like I should know these answers, but I just don't, because I just don't think about it until I came across, I think, a press release or something, and I was like, I should ask. So
Sure.
I really, really appreciate you coming on the
Yeah.
show and answering my questions. Cool.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Hopefully it was helpful for some folks to learn a little bit more. And, and again, I hope everyone has a good opening weekend.
All right. Cool. Thank you.